Trump scored a brutal victory over Iran when the regime, after 88 days of trying to silence its own people, began to restore access to the global internet. Amid pressure from the United States, the economic crisis, and open negotiations amid fears of a new military escalation. This Wednesday, May 27, 2026, Masoud Pezeshkian's order to reconnect the network exposes a retreat that Tehran did not want to show. The dictatorship tried to hide protests, stifle small businesses, control information, and keep millions of Iranians trapped in a digital bubble, but ended up giving in. At a time when Trump keeps the pressure on, without pursuing a weak deal and without easing pressure on the nuclear program, military threats, and the regime's internal control. The internet is still coming back in a limited way, with censorship and instability, but the move already creates a crack. Politics within Iran's own power structure, because the Revolutionary Guard doesn't want to appear defeated while the government tries to avoid social collapse and more pressure in the streets. What did Trump achieve? Why did Tehran give in? How did the internet become the most visible proof of the regime's defeat? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The order came from the head of state, from Iran. But the real significance lies in the climate created by Trump. The blockade had started on January 8th in the midst of internal protests and was reinforced after the military escalation involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. During this period, millions of Iranians were trapped in a controlled network, without normal communication with the world, while small businesses, digital workers, families, and opponents suffered in the dark. Now, the gradual return of the internet shows that the regime had to ease one of its most brutal tools of control in order to gain breathing room at home and negotiate abroad. Connection still doesn't mean full freedom. Platforms remain blocked. Many people still depend on VPNs. And access remains unstable in several areas. Even so, the change is significant because the dictatorship spent weeks insisting that the blackout was necessary for security. Now, when the pressure increased, the Iranian government itself effectively admits that it couldn't maintain the isolation without further increasing the economic collapse and social strain. The internet is back because the regime needed to prevent internal tensions from boiling over completely. That's where Trump emerges as the factor that changes the equation. The American administration maintained talks with regional mediators but did not let up on military pressure. On May 25th, the United States Central Command reported strikes against missile launch sites and vessels suspected of preparing mines in southern Iran near the sensitive Gulf area. Washington called the action a defense of American troops. Tehran complained, threatened to retaliate, but stayed at the table. This detail shows how tight the situation is. The regime protests in public but keeps negotiating behind the scenes. News reports suggest Trump has made the situation intolerable for the Ayatollahs. Iran is facing pressure at its ports, difficulties in oil exports, long lines, and internal strain. It points out that the internet was largely back online, around 88%, and that the order to reconnect the network came from Pezeshkian after months of blackout, as the regime came to the table making concessions. The central issue isn't just technology, it's power. Whoever controls the internet, controls the streets, controls the narrative, and tries to control fear. When that control starts to slip, Trump's political victory becomes more visible. Inside Tehran, the problem is even more serious. Pezeshkian tries to sell a message of easing, but the Revolutionary Guard doesn't want to appear defeated. This split reveals two forces fighting within the same regime. One side understands that Iran is being squeezed and needs to negotiate, while tougher commanders try to maintain the threat as a tool for survival. Trump knows he's not dealing with a normal government. He deals with a divided structure where the president can sign an order, but the armed factions try to sabotage any retreat that looks like defeat. The White House is now working on two paths at the same time. One path involves negotiation, with details of a possible agreement being discussed by intermediaries and by nations in the region. The other path continues to be force, in case Iran tries to use the ceasefire as a cover to prepare an attack, block routes, or protect its nuclear program. Trump didn't just put diplomats at the table. He applied military pressure, economic pressure, and public exposure. The Iranian regime wanted to negotiate while appearing strong, but the return of internet access shows that it had to give up something it said it wouldn't. It also matters that the reconnection comes along with talks about the Strait of Hormuz and about a possible broader agreement. Iranian state television even mentioned a draft that could normalize commercial traffic in the region, while the United States would reduce some of the naval pressure if there were real guarantees. Nothing is settled yet. But the mere circulation of this proposal shows that Tehran is no longer just talking about resistance. It's talking in terms of conditions, deadlines, verification, and political survival. The market's reaction also shows that the world has noticed the mood has shifted. Stock markets rose with the expectation of progress in the talks, while oil remained sensitive to every threat, attack, and statement. This is of direct interest to Trump because he is trying to turn military pressure into practical results without allowing Iran to dictate the pace. When the internet comes back, when negotiators move, and when the Iranian machine starts talking about an agreement, the narrative about who holds the upper hand shifts to the other side. Israel remains a decisive piece on this board. While Iran tries to save its regional influence, the Israel Defense Forces expand operations against Hezbollah-linked structures in Lebanon and maintain pressure against armed groups in Gaza. This reduces Tehran's room for maneuver, because the Iranian regime depends on these networks to project power beyond its borders. With Trump applying pressure from above and Israel pressing on the ground, Iran loses the ability to sell resistance as victory. The return of the internet also creates a dangerous consequence for the regime itself. With more people connected, reports, images, accusations, and demands start circulating again. The Iranian population, which was isolated for months, can once again show the world what happened during the blackout. For Trump, this increases the political cost for the Ayatollahs. For Pezeshkian, it becomes an attempt to ease the crisis. For the Revolutionary Guard, it becomes a risk of losing control of information. That's why the return of internet access is more than just a restored service. It's a crack in the wall of silence. Now the next step depends on Tehran. If the Iranian commanders try to block the reconnection, resume threats, or prepare new attacks, the White House still keeps the military option on the table. Trump's brutal victory is precisely at this point. Iran wanted to decide when the world would hear from its people, when it would negotiate, and when it would threaten. Now it does all of this under pressure, with the internet coming back, with the regime divided, and with Washington watching every move. I'm Milson Alves, global and international affairs analyst, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to engage more with the Milson Alves community.